In this demonstration, I will be getting the AWS CLI, the command line interface, up and running on an on-premises Linux machine. I happen to be using Ubuntu Linux in a VMware workstation environment. It really doesn't matter if it's a virtual machine, which hypervisor is hosting it. It doesn't matter if it's a physical Linux host. Whatever the case is, what we need to know is how to get the CLI running on it and how to authenticate to our AWS account on the CLI in Linux. So what I've done here in my browser is I've navigated to aws.amazon.com/CLI. Here you can download the MSI installer for Windows. You can download the package installer for the Mac OS. And of course, what we're here to do is to work with the Linux installer. So it instructs us to download, unzip, and then run the Linux installer. Also take note down below, for Amazon Linux, it says that if you're using the Amazon Linux image, or the Amazon machine image for that, when you deploy an EC2 instance, it will already have the CLI pre-installed. Well, that's good to know and very convenient. But that's not what we're doing here. So I'm going to click the link for the Linux installer. Now that takes me into the AWS documentation for this related topic. So I'm going to click on AWS CLI installation instructions. Expand Linux. Here we get a list of the installation requirements. And as we go further down, it suggests that we use the curl command, which allows us to reach out and grab something from a URL and download it to our Linux host. It also suggests that we run the sudo command to run the installer because it needs required privileges if you're not already logged in as root, which you normally shouldn't be in Linux for security reasons. If you are going to be logged in as root, you want to keep it short and only do admin tasks that require it and then sign in with a regular user account. I'm going to go ahead and copy that command by clicking the copy button. Okay, so here in my on-premises Ubuntu Linux virtual machine, I'm going to run the curl command. I'm going to specify the URL that I've copied. There's a -o here, which allows us to specify what the downloaded file will be called. It will be called AWS CLI v2.zip. Notice that my current working path is the home directory, as indicated with the tilde symbol, for the user I'm currently logged in as, which in this case happens to be root. I'm going to go ahead and press enter to download that zip file. Okay, and it won't take very long for that to come down. It's only a little over 44 megabytes, almost 45. And if I clear the screen and type ls to list what's in that directory, here we've got our zip file. Now the instructions tell us that we can run unzip for that file. However, here in Ubuntu Linux, it says, well, unzip isn't found. It's not installed. That package isn't here. However, you can install it with apt install unzip. Okay, I can do that. Apt install unzip. Let's install that utility. It'll just reach out over the internet from a repository and get that installed. And now I'll just use my up arrow key to go back to our unzip command. And this time it's doing it. Now I didn't have to use the sudo command to do any of this stuff, because as indicated with my command prompt, I'm logged in as root. I can also type in who am I, which returns root. So I already have full privileges right now. Now, if I type ls to do a listing, we've now got an AWS folder here. I can change directory into AWS. If I do a ls of that, we've got an install script here. So if I run /, meaning current directory, and give it the name of the script, which is just install, and press enter, it will be on its way. And very quickly, it'll return back that, okay, you're good to go. You can now run AWS -- version to verify that it's installed. And that exists in the USR local bin directory. And I can reference that entire thing in my path. So /USR /local /bin /AWS -- version. Let's see if it's actually there. This is good. It's returning back the version of the CLI here, which is 2.7.18. By the way, the version of the CLI can be very important depending on what command line syntax you're using. So imagine that you read the documentation and you try out some of the syntax from the documentation, but it doesn't work correctly on your instance of the CLI. It could be because you're running an outdated version of it. So AWS -- version can be a very important command. I'm going to go ahead and run AWS from that location, but I'm going to use the word configure after AWS and a space. And this is where it wants me to authenticate to my AWS account by specifying the access key and the secret key. Now, when you're signed into the AWS Management Console, you can click on your username in the upper right, go to Security Credentials to see the access key down under Access Keys. You don't see the secret key here, although it's generated when the access key is generated. But what you are prompted to do at the time is download the file. It states here, if you lose or forget your secret key, you can't retrieve it. You'll have to create a new key. And if you can't create a new key, just delete one of the existing ones and create a new one. It will create the access key and the secret key. So you need to save that file when you create those keys on your local machine and make sure it's in a safe place and make sure it gets backed up. Here in Microsoft Excel on my on-premises computer, I've opened up my root key file, which contains both the access key and the secret key. And these are the values that we're going to need to authenticate from the CLI. Okay, so I'll specify that access key value, and I'll do the same thing for the secret key. The default region in my case, let's say, is going to be US-East-1. Default output format is JSON, and I'll accept that by pressing enter, and we should be in. What we can do to verify that we are authenticated is just try to get a list of buckets in our AWS account. We can do that using the AWS command followed by S3 API list-buckets, and I'm going to add --query, and in quotes, buckets, open close square bracket, the collection of all the buckets that get returned, .name. I only want the name of the bucket or the name property. And sure enough, it returns a list of bucket names, which proves that we have successfully authenticated from the AWS CLI that we got installed on our on-premises Ubuntu Linux virtual machine.